The hydroponic garden aboard Research Station Epsilon 9 was Nikolai Petrova's sanctuary. Amidst the sterile corridors and artificial gravity of the station, only here could he find something resembling the natural world he'd left behind on Earth. The soft hum of circulation pumps and the earthy scent of growing things provided a comforting backdrop as he carefully collected samples from his latest experimental hybrid. The Terran specimens appear to be adapting well to the modified atmosphere, he murmured into his recorder, gently examining the purple-tinged leaves that shouldn't exist according to conventional botanical principles. Cross-pollination with Proxima flora showing promising integration at the cellular level. A soft sound, something between a purr and a hum, interrupted his concentration. Nikolai turned to find himself facing one of the station's non-human residents. She stood slightly taller than the average human female, with a sleek physique covered in short, silver-blue fur that caught the light as she moved. Her face was distinctly feline, with large amber eyes that regarded him with unmistakable intelligence. Two pointed ears swiveled attentively on top of her head, and behind her, a long tail swished with elegant precision. "I apologize for startling you," she said, her voice melodious with a faint accent that gave her words an almost musical quality. "I've been observing your work from the laboratory section. Your hybridization techniques are unusual." Nikolai cleared his throat, suddenly aware that he'd been staring. "No apology necessary. I don't believe we've been formally introduced. I'm Nikolai Petrova, xenobotanist from the Earth Science Division." "Saren," she replied, stepping closer to examine his workstation. "Botanical geneticist from the Felixi Collective. I arrived with the Arcturus delegation 3 solar cycles ago." Nikolai had heard about the Felixi, a highly advanced species known for their exceptional understanding of biological systems. Their homeworld orbited a distant star in what humans called the Pleiades cluster. Unlike many other spacefaring species, they rarely ventured beyond their own system, making Saren's presence on Epsilon 9 something of a rarity. "It's an honor to meet you," he said sincerely. "I've read several published studies from Felixi researchers on adaptive plant genetics. Your work with self-evolving crop systems is revolutionary." A subtle change came over her features, the Felixi equivalent of a smile. "And I've observed that your approach to cross-species hybridization breaks several supposed biological barriers. That's precisely why I sought you out." She gestured toward his specimens with a graceful movement of her hand, revealing retractable claws that had been modified with delicate scientific instruments. "These shouldn't survive according to conventional theory, yet they thrive. I'm interested in your methodology." Something in her tone suggested more than mere professional curiosity. Nikolai recognized a kindred spirit, someone who didn't just follow scientific protocols but questioned and pushed boundaries. "Would you like to see my complete research logs?" he offered, surprised at his own eagerness to share his work. Normally, he guarded his unfinished research jealously until publication. "I would," Saren answered, her tail curling in what Nikolai would later learn indicated pleasure. "And perhaps you might be interested in seeing my current project as well. I believe our research paths may have more in common than either of our species has acknowledged." Over the following weeks, what began as professional collaboration evolved into something more complex. They worked side by side in the station's laboratories, their initially cautious exchanges growing into animated discussions that often continued long after their shifts ended. Nikolai found himself fascinated not just by Saren's brilliant mind but by the subtle ways her culture shaped her scientific approach. Where human botanists saw competition between species, Saren perceived symbiotic opportunities. Where Nikolai looked for ways to overcome natural barriers, Saren sought to understand and work within them. "Your people view nature as something to conquer," she observed one evening as they shared a meal in the station's communal area. The sight of a Felixi eating with a human had initially drawn curious glances from other crew members, but they had gradually become accustomed to the unusual pair. "My people see ourselves as merely one thread in a complex biological tapestry." "That's a bit unfair," Nikolai countered, though without heat. Their debates had become comfortable, even enjoyable. "We've moved beyond the conquest mindset. That's why we're here, to understand," not dominate. Saren made the trilling sound that Nikolai had come to recognize as her laugh. Perhaps you have, Nikolai Petrova. You think differently than most humans I've encountered. Something in her tone made him glance up from his food. Her amber eyes were studying him with an intensity that sent an unexpected warmth through his chest. Is that a compliment from a Felixi scientist? I should mark this date in my journal, he teased. We are not as reserved as humans believe, she replied, her tail swishing in a way that somehow emphasized her words. We simply choose our associates with care. 3 months into their collaboration, they achieved their first breakthrough, a hybrid plant that combined Earth's efficient oxygen production with the radiation resistance of Felixi flora. The resulting specimen could theoretically survive in environments hostile to both parent species. As they watched their creation unfurl its first leaves under the laboratory lights, Saren's hand brushed against Nikolai's. The brief contact sent an electric sensation up his arm that had nothing to do with static discharge in the station's dry air. We've created something new, she said softly, her eyes fixed on the gently swaying leaves. Something that neither of our worlds could have produced alone. That's the beauty of collaboration, Nikolai replied, suddenly aware of how close they were standing. Breaking barriers between different worlds. Saren turned to face him, her expression unreadable to human eyes. Some barriers are more complex than others, Nikolai. Some are not meant to be broken without consequences. Before he could ask what she meant, the station's communication system chimed, announcing an incoming transmission from the Felixi vessel in orbit. Saren's ears flattened momentarily, a sign of frustration, Nikolai had learned. I must respond, she said, stepping away. But our discussion is not finished. As she left the laboratory, Nikolai found himself watching her departure with mixed emotions. Their professional relationship had yielded remarkable results, but the strange tension developing between them ventured into territory no xenobiology textbook had prepared him for. What he couldn't know then was that their hybrid plant was not the only unprecedented biological phenomenon occurring in Research Station Epsilon 9. Inside Saren's body, changes were taking place that would challenge everything both their species believed about interspecies compatibility. The observation deck of Epsilon 9 offered an unparalleled view of the gas giant they orbited, a swirling mass of amber and violet streaked with electrical storms that lit up the planet's upper atmosphere. Nikolai found Saren there, silhouetted against the spectacular vista, her posture unnaturally rigid. I've been looking for you, he said, stepping beside her. You missed our scheduled lab session. Saren's ears twitched in acknowledgement, but she didn't turn to face him. I required time to process the communication from my homeworld. Something in her tone made Nikolai uneasy. Over the past 5 months, he'd become adept at reading the subtle inflections in her voice, the minute shifts in her posture that revealed emotions the Felixi typically kept hidden from outsiders. Bad news, he ventured. Complicated news. Her tail, usually in fluid motion, remained unnaturally still. The collective has been monitoring our research. They are concerned about the direction of our collaboration. Nikolai frowned. I thought your superiors approved the hybridization project. The scientific aspects, yes. They find the results promising. Her amber eyes finally met his, pupils contracting in the dim light. It's the personal proximity they question. Personal proximity, Nikolai repeated, a knot forming in his stomach. They're monitoring our interactions outside the lab. The Felixi have biological sensors built into our communication devices, Saren explained, gesturing to the slender band around her wrist that Nikolai had assumed was merely a translator. They track our physiological responses for health and compatibility assessments. And what have they detected that concerns them? Saren's gaze returned to the planet below, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. Changes in my biorhythms. Hormonal fluctuations. Patterns typically associated with. She hesitated, searching for the right term. What humans might call attachment formation. The implication hung between them like an invisible force field. For weeks, Nikolai had been struggling with his own growing feelings he dismissed as inappropriate, impossible, and certainly not reciprocated. Yet here was Saren, suggesting her own biology was responding to him in ways her species found concerning. "Is that why you've been avoiding being alone with me?" he asked quietly, pieces falling into place. The cancelled meals, the suddenly formal communications, the way she maintained precise distance between them in the lab. "I thought distance might reverse the symptoms." A soft trill of frustration escaped her. "It has not proved effective." Nikolai leaned against the railing, trying to process what she was telling him. "Are these changes dangerous for you?" "Not physically," she assured him. "But they are unprecedented. The collective records show no comparable case of a Felixi forming a biological attachment to a member of another species." The silence that followed was charged with unspoken possibilities. Outside the viewport, a massive lightning storm illuminated the planet's atmosphere, casting brief, brilliant light across the observation deck. "What happens now?" Nikolai finally asked. "I've been summoned for medical examination aboard the Felixi vessel." Her tail swished once, betraying anxiety. "Their biological specialist, Tavin, believes I may be experiencing a rare phenomenon known as biochemical resonance." "And that is?" "A physiological response that occurs when a Felixi encounters a genetically compatible mate. It typically happens only between Felixi of complementary genetic profiles." She turned to face him fully, her expression intense. "It should be biologically impossible between different species." Nikolai took an involuntary step closer. "Yet it's happening." "The preliminary readings suggest so," she confirmed. "My body is undergoing changes that mimic the early stages of bond formation." The term hung in the air between them, heavy with implications neither was prepared to address directly. "When do you leave for the examination?" he asked instead. "First light tomorrow. Tavin will conduct a comprehensive analysis." Her ears flattened slightly. "I've requested that you be permitted to review the results." Nikolai raised his eyebrows in surprise. "Would that be allowed?" "I assumed Felixi medical protocols would be classified." "Normally, yes." Her tail curved in a gesture he'd come to associate with determination. "But if my condition is truly linked to interactions with you, then you possess relevant insights." I cited scientific necessity in my request. "And if they refuse?" "Then I will share what I can within permitted boundaries," she replied. "We are scientists, Nikolai. We must approach this with analytical precision, regardless of the personal complications." The clinical tone couldn't quite mask the underlying tension in her voice, a tension Nikolai felt mirrored in his own chest. What had begun as pure scientific collaboration had evolved into something neither of their species had anticipated. "The thing is," he said carefully, "if we're going to approach this scientifically, we need to acknowledge all the variables." He drew a deep breath. "Including the fact that I've been experiencing similar attachment responses." Saren's pupils dilated visibly, her ears pivoting forward in what Nikolai recognized as intense focus. "You have increased heart rate in your presence. Elevated endorphin levels. Preoccupation with your well-being." He listed the symptoms with forced detachment. "Human physiological responses to attraction," she finished softly. The word hung between them, finally spoken aloud. "Yes," he acknowledged. "Though I never intended to burden you with that information." "It's not a burden." Her voice held a quality he hadn't heard before, something gentle, almost vulnerable. "It's a critical data point. If the resonance is mutual, it changes everything about this phenomenon." Before Nikolai could respond, a subtle vibration emanated from Saren's wristband. Her ears flicked back in what he recognized as annoyance as she glanced at the device. "Tavin," she explained. "He's requesting preliminary readings before tomorrow's examination." "You should go," Nikolai said, though everything in him wanted her to stay. "We can continue this discussion after your medical assessment." Saren hesitated, then moved closer, breaching the careful distance she'd maintained between them for weeks. The collective teaches that emotion must be governed by logic, that instinct must yield to reason. Her amber eyes held his with unusual intensity. Yet I find myself questioning these principles when I'm with you. Before Nikolai could process her words, she reached out, her hand hovering inches from his face. A question in the gesture. He nodded almost imperceptibly. Her fingers, warmer than human skin, with soft pads at the tips, traced a gentle path along his jawline. The simple contact sent a shiver through him that had nothing to do with the station's regulated temperature. Your epidermal response is fascinating, she murmured, a scientist's observation in tone, yet something far more intimate in meaning. That's one word for it, he managed, his voice rougher than intended. Her wristband vibrated again, more insistently this time. With visible reluctance, Saren withdrew her hand. I must respond to Tavin's summons. But this conversation is not finished. No, Nikolai agreed softly. It's not. As she departed, her tail brushed against his leg in what might have been accident or might have been deliberate contact. Either way, the brief touch left him staring after her, mind racing with implications neither of them were fully prepared to face. The following day, Nikolai tried to focus on his laboratory work, but his thoughts kept drifting to Saren aboard the Felixi vessel. What would their medical specialist discover? Would the findings confirm what both of them had begun to suspect, that something unprecedented was developing between them? He was cataloging tissue samples when his communication device chimed with a message from Saren, examination complete. Results complex. Returning to Epsilon 9. Meet me in private laboratory 4B at 1900 hours. The 6 hours until their meeting stretched interminably. When Nikolai finally arrived at the designated laboratory, a smaller facility typically used for specialized experiments requiring isolation, he found Saren already waiting. She stood perfectly still, her attention fixed on a holographic display showing complex biological data. Saren, he said quietly, announcing his presence though he suspected her acute hearing had already detected his approach. She turned, and the look in her eyes made his breath catch. Uncertainty, wonder, and something else, something that transcended their species' differences. Tavin's analysis confirmed what we suspected, she said without preamble. I am experiencing biochemical resonance. But it's unlike any case in Felixi medical records. Because I'm human, Nikolai stated the obvious. Because you're you, she corrected. Your specific genetic composition has triggered a response in my biology that should be impossible across species lines. She gestured to the holographic display, which shifted to show comparative cellular images. My reproductive system is undergoing preparatory changes, adapting to accommodate potential genetic material from a non-Felixi source. The scientific implications were staggering, but Nikolai found himself focused on the personal ones. What does this mean for you? For us? Saren's ears flattened slightly, embarrassment, he realized. Among my people, such changes typically occur only when a lifelong bond is forming. It's a process that, once begun, follows a predetermined biological path. And that path leads where, exactly, he asked, heart pounding so loudly he wondered if her sensitive hearing could detect it. Saren met his gaze directly, all scientific detachment falling away. Toward genetic compatibility. Toward the possibility of offspring. Toward a biological bond that, among the Felixi, is considered permanent. The implications left Nikolai momentarily speechless. This wasn't just unexpected attraction between different species. This was Saren's body literally transforming to become compatible with his, a biological process with profound consequences. Tavin was, disturbed by the findings, she continued when he didn't immediately respond. He has recommended my immediate return to the collective for further study and potential medical intervention to halt the process. And what do you want? Nikolai asked softly, dreading her answer yet needing to hear it. Saren moved closer, her tail swishing with uncharacteristic agitation. I want to understand this phenomenon. As a scientist, it challenges everything I believed about interspecies biology. She paused, then added more quietly, and as an individual, I find I cannot dismiss what has been growing between us as merely a biological anomaly to be corrected. The hydroponics lab was empty save for their hybrid plant specimens, which had grown remarkably in the weeks since their initial breakthrough. Nikolai found himself staring at one particularly successful cross, a luminescent blue-leafed creation that pulsed gently with its own inner light. Like its creators, it represented something entirely new in the universe. The door slid open with a soft hiss, and Saren entered, her movements more deliberate than usual. 3 days had passed since their conversation about the medical findings, 3 days during which they'd maintained professional interactions in public while privately grappling with the implications of what was happening between them. "You've been avoiding me," she stated, moving to stand beside him at the plant observation station. "I needed time to process," Nikolai admitted. "This is unprecedented territory. For both of us." Saren's tail curled around her own leg, a self-comforting gesture he'd noticed she employed when anxious. "The Felixi transport leaves in 2 planetary rotations. Tavin has prepared a quarantine chamber for my return journey." Nikolai looked up sharply. "Quarantine? Are they treating this like a disease?" "They're treating it like an unknown biological phenomenon with potentially far-reaching implications," she corrected, though her flattened ears betrayed her own discomfort with the situation. "From a purely scientific perspective, their caution is warranted." "And from a personal perspective?" Nikolai asked quietly. Saren's gaze shifted to their hybrid plants, her expression softening. "From a personal perspective, I find myself reluctant to leave." Her voice dropped to nearly a whisper. "To leave you?" The admission hung in the air between them, delicate and momentous. Nikolai reached out slowly, giving her time to withdraw if she wished, and placed his hand next to hers on the observation table, close but not touching. "What happens if you return to the collective?" he asked. "Tavin has outlined a treatment protocol to reverse the biochemical changes," she explained. "It would require several lunar cycles of specialized hormone therapy, but he believes the resonance could be suppressed eventually." "And if it's not suppressed?" Saren's amber eyes met his directly. "Then the changes would continue. My reproductive system would complete its adaptation. And I would remain biologically bonded to you, regardless of physical proximity." The implications were staggering. A lifelong connection? Yes. Her tail uncurled from her leg and swished once, decisively. "Among my people, such bonds are considered sacred. Once formed, they alter our very biochemistry. It is why the collective is so alarmed. No Felixi has ever bonded with a non-Felixi before." Nikolai considered this information carefully. "And if you don't return? If you refuse the treatment?" "Then the resonance would continue its natural progression." Her voice remained steady, but he noticed the fine fur along her arms had raised slightly, a physiological response to emotional intensity, he'd learned. Within another lunar cycle, the changes would become irreversible. "Leading to complete genetic compatibility," Nikolai said, thinking aloud. "The potential for offspring that would be neither fully human nor fully Felixi." "Yes." Saren's ear twitched. "Though the probability of successful conception would remain unknown without further research." Even in this moment of profound personal revelation, she maintained her scientist's precision. It was one of the qualities Nikolai had grown to admire, and eventually love, about her. The realization struck him with surprising clarity. Love. Not just fascination or attraction or intellectual compatibility. Something deeper, something that transcended the biological and cultural differences between them. "What do you want, Saren?" he asked softly. "Not what the collective expects, not what science dictates. What do you want?" Her pupils dilated, dark against amber. "I want to follow this path wherever it leads. I want to discover what we might become together." She paused, gathering courage. "I want you, Nikolai Petrova." The simple declaration unlocked something in him, a tension he'd been holding since they'd first discovered the nature of her physiological changes. He closed the small distance between their hands, his fingers interlacing with hers. The texture of her fur against his skin sent a pleasant shiver up his arm. "I want you too," he confessed. "I've been trying to rationalize it, to explain it away as scientific curiosity or forbidden attraction. But it's more than that." "Yes," she agreed, her free hand coming up to touch his face with a gentleness that belied the retractable claws he knew lay beneath her fingertips. "It is more." The moment stretched between them, charged with possibility. Then Saren pulled back slightly, her expression becoming serious. "But you must understand what this means," she insisted. "If I decline to return to the collective, if I allow this bond to solidify, there will be consequences. My people may revoke my scientific credentials, may even formally separate me from the collective. And your own colleagues, how will they view a human who has chosen a non-human mate?" Nikolai considered her words carefully. She was right, the path ahead would not be easy. Interspecies relationships weren't unheard of in the wider galactic community, but they remained rare and often viewed with suspicion, particularly when they involved reproduction potential. "I can't predict how everyone will react," he admitted. "But I know that what's happening between us, whatever it is, deserves to be explored, not suppressed. And isn't that what we do? Explore the unknown." A sound emerged from Saren that he'd never heard before, half purr, half laugh, wholly approving. "You make our situation sound like a scientific expedition." "Isn't it, in a way?" Nikolai smiled. "We've discovered something unprecedented, something that challenges existing paradigms." He squeezed her hand gently. "Something beautiful." Her expression softened further. "The most remarkable discoveries often occur at the boundaries between different worlds," she said, echoing words he'd spoken months ago when they'd first begun their hybridization project. "Exactly," he agreed. "So maybe we're just another kind of hybridization experiment. One with unexpectedly personal stakes." Before she could respond, her wrist communicator emitted a series of urgent tones. Her ears flattened against her head as she checked the message. "Tavin," she explained, her voice tightening. "He's detected the continued progression of the resonance through my vital monitors. He's requesting immediate transport to the Felixi vessel." "What will you tell him?" Nikolai asked, suddenly afraid that the practical realities of their situation would overwhelm this fragile new understanding between them. Saren squared her shoulders, decision evident in every line of her body. "That I decline medical intervention. That I choose to follow this biological path to its natural conclusion." Her tail swished once, decisively. "That I choose you." The simplicity and certainty of her declaration took his breath away. In Felixi culture, he knew, such directness was rare. Emotions were typically expressed through subtle gestures and implied meanings rather than spoken aloud. "There's something else you should know," she continued, her gaze unwavering. "Something Tavin discovered but that I've withheld until now." Nikolai felt a flutter of concern. "What is it?" "The resonance process, it's not one-sided as we initially believed." Her fingers tightened around his. "Your body has been responding to mine as well, though in more subtle ways. Your hormone levels, your pheromone production, they've shifted to become more compatible with Felixi biology." He blinked in surprise. "I've been changing too." "Yes. Not as dramatically as my changes, but significantly nonetheless." Her expression held wonder. "It appears the connection between us operates on both sides of the equation, creating a unique biochemical dialogue between human and Felixi physiology." The implications were staggering. Not just Saren adapting to him, but a mutual evolution, their bodies literally transforming to accommodate each other. "So when you said your body was preparing for the possibility of offspring," he began. "It may not be merely theoretical," she finished. "Tavin's final analysis suggests a 62% probability of viable conception, given the ongoing adaptations in both our reproductive systems." Nikolai felt as though the artificial gravity had suddenly intensified. We could have children. Together? Potentially, she confirmed, watching his reaction carefully. They would be something entirely new, neither human nor Felixi, but a unique hybrid with characteristics of both species. The thought should have terrified him. Instead, Nikolai felt a surge of something unexpected, excitement, wonder, possibility. Like our plants, he said, gesturing to the luminescent hybrid beside them. Something greater than the sum of its parts. Saren's ears perked forward, the Felixi equivalent of a hopeful expression. You're not disturbed by this possibility? Surprised, yes. Overwhelmed, definitely. He shook his head, amazed at his own reaction. But disturbed? No. Somehow it feels right. Her wrist communicator chimed again, more insistently this time. With a decisive movement, Saren removed the device entirely and set it on the lab table. They will track my location soon enough, she said, but I would prefer this moment remain private between us. Then, with the same methodical care she applied to her most delicate experiments, she stepped closer and placed both hands on either side of Nikolai's face. Her touch was warm, her fur soft against his skin. Among my people, she said softly, a life bond is acknowledged through the sharing of breath and essence. It is both symbolic and biochemically significant. Nikolai understood what she was asking. Slowly, giving her time to reconsider, he leaned down until their foreheads touched. Her scent enveloped him, an exotic blend of spice and sweetness that had become increasingly enticing to him over the months. I choose this path, he whispered. I choose you. Her purr deepened as she tilted her face upward, bringing their lips together in a kiss that bridged worlds. The contact was electric, sending waves of sensation through Nikolai that seemed to resonate at a cellular level. It was as though something locked within him had finally found its key. When they finally separated, Saren's eyes had taken on a luminescent quality, pupils wide with emotion. It is begun, she said simply. The final phase of resonance. What happens now? Nikolai asked, still holding her close. Now we face the consequences of our choice. Her tail curled around his leg in a possessive gesture. Together. As if on cue, the laboratory door slid open. Tavin stood in the entrance, his silver-gray fur bristling with what Nikolai recognized as alarm. Behind him stood the station's human director, her expression caught between concern and confusion. Saren of the Felixi Collective, Tavin began formally, your vital signs indicate progressive resonance bonding. I must insist on immediate medical intervention before irreversible biological changes occur. Saren straightened but did not move away from Nikolai. I decline intervention, Tavin. I have chosen to accept the resonance and its outcomes. The Felixi medical specialist's ears flattened completely against his head, the most extreme display of distress Nikolai had ever witnessed in their species. This is unprecedented, Tavin protested. The collective cannot sanction such a bond with a non-Felixi. The biological implications alone are fascinating and worthy of study, Saren interrupted, her scientific persona emerging despite the emotional intensity of the moment. What is occurring between us represents an evolutionary possibility previously unknown to either of our species. The station director cleared her throat. Would someone please explain exactly what is happening here, she asked, looking between the three of them with growing impatience. Nikolai stepped forward, keeping one hand connected to Saren's. Director Ivanova, Saren and I have discovered that our species are more biologically compatible than previously believed. In fact, our proximity has triggered adaptive changes that may allow for. He hesitated, searching for the most diplomatic phrasing. Interbreeding, Tavin stated bluntly. Their bodies are reconfiguring for reproductive compatibility. It violates all known principles of xenobiology. Director Ivanova's eyebrows shot up, her gaze moving between Nikolai and Saren with new understanding. I see, she said, and to her credit, maintained her professional demeanor. And this process is ongoing? Yes, Saren confirmed. And I have chosen to allow it to continue, despite the collective's recommendation for medical intervention. It is more than a recommendation, Tavin interjected. The Collective Council has issued a direct order for your return. They are concerned about the wider implications of allowing such a cross-species bond to establish. They're afraid, Nikolai realized aloud. Afraid of what this means for the barriers they've maintained between species. Tavin's tail lashed once, a rare display of emotion for the typically composed medical specialist. They are concerned about biological security and the natural order, as they should be. Director Ivanova raised a hand, silencing further debate. As the ranking authority on this station, I need to consider the implications for all parties. She fixed Saren with a direct gaze. Are these changes harmful to you or posing any threat to station personnel? No, Saren replied confidently. The changes are natural, if unprecedented. They present no biological hazard. The director nodded thoughtfully, then turned to Tavin. And the Felixi Collective's concerns, do they extend to withdrawing their participation in the joint research initiatives on this station? Tavin hesitated, clearly unprepared for this practical consideration. I cannot speak definitively on behalf of the Council, but scientific cooperation remains valuable to the Collective. Then I propose the following, Director Ivanova said with the efficient decisiveness that had earned her command of Epsilon 9. Specialist Saren will remain on this station under observation by both human and Felixi medical personnel. The biological changes she and xenobotanist Petrova are experiencing will be documented as a scientific study, the first of its kind on interspecies biochemical adaptation. She looked between them all, her expression firm but not unkind. This approach serves science while respecting individual autonomy. Does anyone object? Tavin's ears twitched with obvious discomfort, but he offered no immediate protest. After a moment, he said, I will convey your proposal to the Collective Council. Until their response, I request permission to establish daily monitoring protocols for both subjects. Granted, the director agreed, then turned to Nikolai and Saren. I expect complete transparency regarding any developments in your condition. This station values scientific discovery, but safety remains our priority. Understood, Nikolai replied, feeling Saren's silent agreement through their joined hands. As Director Ivanova and Tavin departed, the latter casting one last concerned glance at Saren, Nikolai felt the tension gradually release from his shoulders. It wasn't a perfect resolution, but it was a beginning. That went better than expected, he murmured to Saren once they were alone again. Director Ivanova is more pragmatic than most humans I've encountered, Saren observed, her tail swishing thoughtfully. But this is only the first hurdle. The Collective Council may not accept her compromise so easily. Nikolai squeezed her hand gently. Whatever comes next, we face it together. As scientists and as. He paused, unsure of the appropriate term. Bond mates, Saren supplied, her amber eyes gleaming with certainty. In Felixi tradition, that is what we have become. Bond mates, he repeated, finding he liked the sound of it. Partners in the most unprecedented research project in either of our careers. Her purr of amusement vibrated against him as she leaned closer. Indeed. Though I suspect the results may be more personally significant than professionally recognized. As they stood there in the quiet laboratory, surrounded by the hybrid plants that had first brought them together, Nikolai felt a profound sense of rightness. What they were embarking on would challenge boundaries, upset conventions, and possibly change the understanding of interspecies biology forever. But most importantly, it would allow something beautiful to grow between worlds that had always been kept separate, something that, like their luminescent botanical creation, would shine with its own unique light. The collective believes adaptation should only occur within established parameters, Saren said softly, her gaze moving to their hybrid plant. But nature itself tells a different story. Life finds unexpected pathways. It crosses barriers. It creates new possibilities. And so do we, Nikolai agreed, drawing her closer. One impossible chemical reaction at a time. Her answering purr was all the confirmation he needed that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them as neither human nor Felixi alone, but as something wonderfully, impossibly new. Together.